"You'll embarrass yourself," he said with a smirk. 2 weeks later, that smirk would be buried somewhere under a mountain of regret and a shattered scoreboard. That grin? That wasn't confidence. That was a foreclosure notice on his pride. He just didn't know it yet. His words came wrapped in the cheap plastic of superiority, the kind of throwaway comment men like him toss out like cigarette butts, never imagining someone might light it on fire and send smoke signals back. The moment was small, forgettable to him. But for Merritt Reeves, it was the moment the ignition clicked. Not because it was the first time she'd been underestimated, oh no, but because this time she decided to answer in a language even arrogance can understand. Results. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Merritt didn't carry her experience like a flag, more like a scalpel, silent, precise, and only unsheathed when necessary. 32 years old, former military, and currently Chicago PD's most efficient patrol officer by both the stats and the street gossip. No complaints, highest arrest rate, and enough commendations to paper a small office. She didn't posture, she didn't bark, she didn't even flinch when things got loud. Because she had already lived through loud. She had a kind of discipline that made you think twice before testing her, if you were smart. And if you weren't, well, you smirked. She didn't need anyone's approval, she needed access. And SWAT was supposed to be her next door to kick in. But from the moment she stepped into that selection hall, it wasn't just her competence being questioned, it was her very presence. One woman in a room full of swagger, and they acted like she'd walked into their poker night without an invitation. Captain Thaddeus Blackwood stood front and center, a Rolex-wearing monument to legacy policing. He came from the kind of lineage that didn't need resumes. Police commissioner father, senator brother, and a Rolodex thicker than his ethics. He didn't lead the SWAT unit. He inherited it like a ski lodge, and he ran it like his father's country club. Application denied unless you golfed with the right ghost. The man was 6'2" of tradition and testosterone, and when he saw Merritt, he didn't see competition. He saw a PR problem. "Looks like we have a visitor," he said, all chuckle and cruelty. The men laughed like a barbershop full of bullies. "This is SWAT selection, not community outreach," he said, flashing that politician's smile. She produced her approval email from Chief Vance, and he barely looked at it, already circling her like a hawk that preferred pre-cooked prey. "This isn't about inclusion," he lectured. "This is life or death work. We don't lower standards." He delivered that last line like he was spitting gospel, not realizing she had already met standards that most of them would have wet their gear trying to survive. It wasn't a rejection. It was a public declaration that she didn't belong. Merritt stood her ground, voice steady. She quoted policy, cited her qualifications, and reminded him that equal access wasn't optional. Blackwood leaned in close, eyes narrowed, and dismissed her persistence as insubordination. One of the older officers in the back cracked. "Remember Rodriguez last year? Built like an Olympian, still couldn't hack it." Another blow, another laugh. Merritt caught the eye of Ezra Mitchell, younger, newer, and clearly uncomfortable. He looked at her like someone realizing the punchline wasn't funny, but he said nothing. He couldn't afford to. She walked out, not because she'd been bested, but because the rules were bent before she even picked up the pen. Chief Vance stood in the doorway, unreadable. No rescue, no reprimand, just that look senior officers get when they know they'll be asked about it later and plan to answer in paragraphs that say nothing. The door slammed behind her, echoing like a verdict in a courthouse that doesn't believe your kind of testimony. Back at her apartment, Merritt sat in the quiet, the challenge coin between her fingers. That coin wasn't shiny anymore. Its edges were worn smooth from years of combat nerves and late-night patrols. It had seen desert heat, bar fights, and bureaucratic nightmares. Her dad had given it to her after she'd finished training, told her it wasn't just a souvenir. "This isn't a token," he'd said. "It's a scar you can hold, a reminder that she'd been through worse and prevailed." Tonight, it didn't just sit in her palm, it throbbed like memory. She could still hear Blackwood's voice, still smell the sweat in that room, still feel the silence when nobody stood with her. But anger? That wasn't the fuel. This was different. Cold, clean, focused. Like loading a round into a chamber with surgical precision. They didn't know who she was, but they would. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the next woman walking into that room, and Merritt had no intention of letting that room stay the same. Her phone buzzed just after sunset. Dad lit up the screen, and she knew he'd already heard. Wyatt Reeves didn't waste time on small talk. "Mary," he said, using the name only he was allowed to resurrect. "Heard you got tossed out by that damn brass monkey in a Rolex." Merritt exhaled, half a sigh, half a laugh. Something like that. There was a pause, the kind you only earn after decades of shared silence. Then his voice came through, steady as ever. "You gonna file one of those polite complaints? Let the system chew its own tail until it spits out a footnote?" She didn't answer right away. The silence said enough. He let it sit before delivering the line that would etch itself in her spine. "If you want change, sweetheart, you don't knock politely. You storm in with paperwork and precision. And you make damn sure they remember your name when they clean up the mess." He didn't tell her what to do, he never had. He reminded her of what she already knew. Polite didn't fix broken, and silence never made history. An hour later, a knock came at her door. Desiree Winters stood there, with Ezra Mitchell awkwardly in tow, like two messengers from opposite ends of the same war. Desiree didn't even wait for a greeting. "Everyone's talking. They think it's hilarious." She didn't say who they were, but Merritt could fill in the roster. Ezra stayed near the entryway, hands shoved deep in his jacket like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be inside. "I thought you should know," Desiree continued. "The department's sharpshooting competition is in 2 weeks. City officials will be there, Chief Vance too. It's the one event Blackwood doesn't control. You win that, nobody can spin it." Merritt raised an eyebrow. "And you think they'll let me register?" Ezra finally spoke, quiet but steady. "You'll need a lieutenant's signature. Jenkins won't. Shaw might." Merritt studied him for a second. He looked young, nervous, like he hadn't decided whether to speak up or shut up. "Why are you helping me, Mitchell?" He hesitated. "My sister was better than half the guys in her unit. They still made her quit. Just figured maybe some battles are worth fighting, even if they're not yours." Merritt didn't respond, but something shifted behind her eyes. He was a stray match in a room soaked in kerosene, not sure if he'd light up or burn out. But she noted the gesture. People remember the ones who hand them kindling when it's cold. After they left, she moved toward the closet, not the one with coats and duty boots, the other one. The hidden panel behind her bookshelf slid open with the quiet resistance of something untouched for too long. Inside lay her precision rifle, black matte with silver scoring where her hands had molded it through years of drills. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an old friend with secrets. She ran her fingers along the barrel, checking for dust and memory. The leather case beside it held medals no one in her precinct knew existed. One bore a symbol she hadn't spoken aloud in years, her unit's insignia, the one that came with missions that never made it into newspapers. She didn't need these things to prove anything, but she needed them now to remind herself who she was before she got told who she wasn't. The humiliation she'd swallowed earlier now hardened into preparation. They laughed in that briefing room like she was an extra in someone else's script. But the punchline was coming, and this time she'd be the one holding the mic. The next day she took a shot at the entry process. Lieutenant Jenkins gave her a look like she'd asked him to fundraise for socialism. "Blackwood runs that thing," he grunted. "Wouldn't be smart to poke that bear." Translation, he liked his desk and wasn't about to risk it for someone outside the inner circle. Dead end. But she wasn't aiming for easy. She was aiming for access, so she made her way to Lieutenant Octavia Shaw, known around the department for 2 things: fairness, and a stare that could silence a drunk at 10 paces. Shaw didn't smile, didn't frown either. She just listened. Merritt explained her intent, her qualifications, her request. Shaw looked at her, then down at the coin Merritt was unconsciously flipping in her hand. Her eyes narrowed. "That's not a standard issue." Merritt tucked the coin back in her pocket, offering nothing. Shaw didn't push, but she signed the form. "The deadline's Friday." "Don't waste my signature." By Thursday night, her registration was locked. No announcements, no squad gossip, no warning flare for Blackwood. Just one name quietly added to the list: Officer Merritt Reeves, 3rd District Patrol. When Ezra texted her, "Confirmed, you're on the roster, he's not happy," she replied with nothing but a period. That was the point, no fanfare, just focus. Blackwood wouldn't know she was coming until she was already in the scope, and by the time he realized it, it would be too late to blink. The facility was empty when she arrived. Early morning stillness, the kind of silence only broken by the metallic clink of gear being laid out by hands that remembered what mattered. Merritt moved with precision, her boots echoing soft taps across the polished concrete as she reached her assigned lane. The familiar weight of her precision rifle felt steady in her grip until she looked closer. The scope's windage dial sat too far right. Her barrel-to-stock alignment was off by millimeters. To the average shooter, it was nothing. To someone trained to make a half-inch shot in wind and darkness, it screamed sabotage. The trigger had a looseness that hadn't been there 2 days ago. Merritt didn't panic, but her breath slowed. Her pulse did not. She ran a cloth down the barrel, feeling every groove like she was reading Braille for betrayal, like someone had whispered treason into the barrel and left it there to echo. They didn't want her to lose, they wanted her to malfunction. Quietly, publicly, and they wanted it to look like her fault. Her phone buzzed. A single text from Ezra. "Don't use your locker. 3 SWAT guys stayed late. Heard them talking about insurance." She stared at the message like it might burst into flames in her hand. She didn't respond. Instead, she slipped the phone back into her jacket and scanned the room, half expecting a second act to unfold. Nothing. Just the thrum of fluorescent lights and the cold presence of tampered steel. She left the range briefly and returned with a small toolkit from her car. She needed to confirm what she already knew. 5 minutes in, and the sabotage was undeniable. Her combination locker was compromised. She opened her backup range kit, found a scratched Allen key that wasn't hers. She took photos of everything, but didn't upload them. Not yet. As she was packing her tools again, the range doors opened quietly. Lieutenant Octavia Shaw stepped into the space like she owned the air in it. No greeting, just a slow walk across the concrete, eyes on the disassembled rifle like it was evidence in a case she'd already solved. She didn't arrive with backup. She was the backup. Merritt watched her stop at the edge of her bench and slide a small USB drive onto the table. "Security footage," Shaw said flatly. "Main cams were disabled. They missed the backups installed last month. I haven't watched it, that's your choice." She didn't offer comfort. No reassurance, no promises, just facts and freedom. Her eyes lingered on Merritt's hands, still holding the misaligned scope, and on the challenge coin sitting beside the tools like a witness with a memory. Then Shaw turned and left. No threat, no alliance, just a door swinging shut behind someone who clearly knew more than she was saying. Merritt pulled out her phone and inserted the drive. The footage was grainy but clear. 3 officers, 2 she recognized from Blackwood's inner circle, entered the locker room just after 11 p.m. One brought a slim toolkit, the third stood watch. 20 minutes later they were gone. 40 minutes after that, a 4th figure entered. Ezra. He scanned the lockers, checked hers, pulled out his phone, timestamp 2 minutes before the text. Her jaw clenched, not from anger, but from certainty. He wasn't in on it. He was the warning. With the evidence in hand, Merritt could have raised hell, filed complaints, gotten the competition postponed, made noise, but instead, she picked up her phone and made a different kind of call. her father answered on the second ring. You ever rebuild a scope on a half-stripped chassis using field kit and spite? She asked. Wyatt Reeves chuckled. Sounds like Tuesday. What's the problem? She laid it out flat, no drama. He listened, then laid out a step-by-step solution that sounded more like a surgical plan than a repair job. You don't fix broken things, he said. You make them so precise, the cracks disappear. For the next 6 hours, Merritt operated like a woman possessed. She recalibrated the barrel, rebalanced the scope with hand-cut shims, rethreaded the trigger, and zeroed it all in against a makeshift setup in the empty range. Every adjustment came with a breath. Every bolt turn came with purpose. This wasn't about proving she was good enough. It was about reminding herself that she never stopped being excellent, just because someone tried to make her forget it. When the last round clicked into the chamber and the final sight test hit dead center, she sat back and looked at the rifle. Not like a weapon, but like a resume. She could have reported everything, could have made it public, could have demanded consequences, but she didn't. Because this wasn't about the scandal, it was about the shot. Because tattletales make noise, operators make impact. They wanted her rattled. Instead, they handed her clarity. They handed her a target she didn't have to hunt for. Merritt Reeves didn't need to scream injustice to get heard. She just needed to show up, calibrated, centered, and ready to pull the trigger when it mattered most. By the time Merritt stepped into the department's shooting facility, the room was already humming with energy. Bleachers lined one wall, digital scoreboards flickered with early results, and the kind of buzz that only comes with uniforms and egos thick in the air. She didn't wear anything special. Standard-issue patrol uniform, hair tied back, eyes forward. But the silence that followed her entrance sliced through the chatter like a scalpel through red tape. She wasn't early, she wasn't late, she was exactly when she meant to be. All eyes on her, not with curiosity but with disbelief seasoned in sarcasm. There goes the patrol girl, they whispered behind half-covered grins, the one who dared to crash the elite party. Merritt didn't blink. She checked in, stashed her bag, and walked the range like it was her living room, calm, calculated. Dead quiet inside, while the room pulsed with expectation that she'd fail loud. The first stage was standard, target shooting at 25 yards. She stood, took a breath, and let muscle memory do the talking. The gun became an extension of thought. Sight, breath, trigger, impact, bullseye. Again, again. No twitch, no drama. By the time she finished her round, the scoring screen blinked perfect. The applause was hesitant, like the crowd wasn't sure whether they should cheer or wait for her to trip on her way back, but the silence was louder. On to stage 2. Timed shooting with position changes, standing to kneeling, kneeling to prone, cycling targets like a machine wired for rhythm. She didn't shoot. She sang bullets into bullseyes, fluidity over force, control over chaos. Her score climbed, another perfect. Then a minor deduction, just enough to keep them believing she was mortal. A few heads turned now, mostly among the veterans who knew enough to recognize what they were seeing wasn't just competence. It was command, and it was making people nervous. Stage 3, the obstacle course, was designed to shake people loose. Loud distractions, strobe flashes, unpredictable target sequences, awkward terrain. The kind of course where your own body betrays you if you're not fully present. Merritt moved through it like she'd already solved the puzzle before she stepped onto the floor. Her transitions were clean, her reloads seamless. The distractions barely registered. Somewhere between the 4th and 5th target, Blackwood's voice rang out from the judge's stand, loud enough to carry, "Hope she brought backup glasses." A few of his SWAT guys chuckled. Merritt didn't even flinch. She took the next shot with one hand, mid-step, nailed a target center mass, then pivoted and fired again. The laughter died a quiet, awkward death. Their noise was wind. She was built for storms. By the time she crossed the finish line, she'd racked up a score that put her in the top 5, not just for the day, for the department's recorded history. She grabbed a towel, wiped her face, and waited. The final stage would decide it all. The 4th and final event was where legends were made. Or forgotten. The Precision Challenge. 6 targets, increasingly distant and brutally small. The final one, so far, it looked like a smudge on a windshield. Merritt stepped onto the line. The scoreboard reset. Everyone watched now, but not the same way they had at the start. This time it wasn't about disbelief. It was about tension. The kind you can feel in your teeth. She placed her challenge coin beside her scope. A ritual, a signal, a dare. Her body settled into position. Breathing slowed. The chatter stopped. No more jokes, no more cheap shots. Just a patrol officer with a rifle and the quiet confidence of someone who'd already won something more important than a trophy. The first shot broke the silence like glass underfoot. Target 1 hit. Confirmation light blinked. Then 2, 3, 4. Each one landed with surgical precision. She wasn't adjusting to the range was adjusting to her. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably, arms crossed, lips pursed. Ezra, watching from the sidelines, gave a small nod, like a soldier acknowledging a sniper's rite of passage. Then came target 6. The ghost. The whisper at the end of the range. Merritt exhaled, read the wind, held steady, and pulled. The crack echoed like judgment. A full 2 seconds passed before the confirmation light flashed, direct center. The scoreboard updated and then froze. The number it displayed broke a 15-year-old record held by a Blackwood. It didn't just win the day. It rewrote the day. One shot changed a scoreboard, and maybe the damn system. Merritt stood up, pocketed her coin, and walked off the line like nothing had happened, because for her, it hadn't happened yet. Not until they realized they could never unsee what they just saw. Blackwood moved fast, too fast. As soon as the final score lit up the screen and the crowd broke into startled applause, he pushed his way to the mic like a man trying to plug a leaking dam with chewing gum. "There appears to be a technical malfunction with the scoring system," he announced, voice straining to hold authority he no longer possessed. "All results will need to be manually verified." He gestured vaguely toward Merritt. "Additionally, Officer Reeves' equipment will require inspection for potential unauthorized modifications." The accusation hung in the air like a fart in a chapel. Unmistakable and offensive. Chief Vance rose from his seat in the VIP row with the precision of a man who knew how to cut without bleeding. "Standard procedure for record-breaking scores includes verification, yes," he said evenly. "But let's maintain professional courtesy while we do it, Captain." His tone was silk, but his eyes were steel. Before Merritt could step forward, Ezra did. "Sir," he said, loud enough for every officer within 20 feet to hear, "I witnessed several SWAT officers entering Officer Reeves' equipment locker the night before the competition. I have documentation." The room froze. Blackwood blinked once, his jaw locking in visible fury. Ezra pulled a flash drive from his pocket and handed it to the chief range officer. "Time-stamp and surveillance footage confirms it." From the back of the crowd, Lieutenant Shaw walked up, calm as a ticking watch. Without a word, she placed a second flash drive on the table beside Vance. "Additional footage," she said, "and some files regarding historical selection patterns." The data didn't explode. It landed like grenades in a porcelain shop. Merritt didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The silence was already doing the heavy lifting. Every officer who had doubted her, who had dismissed her as a diversity checkbox or a political experiment, now found themselves suddenly short on breath and long on second thoughts. Then Merritt stepped forward. No microphone, no speech, just a simple motion. She pulled a redacted personnel file from her bag and placed it next to the flash drives. Then she laid down her challenge coin beside it like a signature. "Before I joined Chicago PD, I served 8 years in the U.S. Army. 4 of those with a specialized unit under Joint Special Operations Command." A murmur swept the room. "I was one of 3 master instructors certified in extreme distance precision engagement." She looked straight at Blackwood. "You didn't just underestimate a woman. You underestimated a Tier 1 trainer." That one hit harder than any round fired that day. The quiet that followed was thick with recalibration. Officers who had laughed now avoided eye contact. Veterans in the room nodded in recognition, not of her words, but of the weight they carried. Merritt didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When you've trained the people who train the world's best, volume is irrelevant. Chief Vance returned to the mic, this time with a folder in hand. 3 actions will take place immediately, he said. First, Officer Reeves will receive a formal, third-party SWAT assessment based entirely on performance metrics. Second, an external audit will review tactical selection processes for bias and irregularities. And third, an internal investigation is opening into the sabotage incident involving Officer Reeves' equipment. He closed the folder and looked around the room like a judge handing down gospel. Let this be clear. Chicago PD will not operate on legacy and intimidation. We will operate on merit. The statement landed like thunder. HOA rules just got overridden by constitutional amendments. The room didn't erupt, it inhaled, a long collective breath of realization and reckoning. Even the chairs seemed to lean away from Blackwood, like they didn't know him anymore. His name still carried weight, sure, but now it dragged like baggage with no wheels. Shaw gave Merritt a subtle nod before turning away. Ezra exhaled, the tension in his shoulders slowly dissolving, and Merritt, she just stood there, composed, collected, and finally, recognized, not as a problem, not as an exception, but as the new standard. 3 weeks after the competition, Merritt was cleared for her final tactical assessment. No more paperwork hoops, no more hidden prerequisites whispered in locker rooms. This one was real, a live hostage scenario. An armed suspect barricaded inside an apartment with 2 civilians, the air thick with unpredictability. Merritt was assigned to observation, standard protocol for newcomers. Keep quiet, stay sharp, don't interfere. But when the suspect's behavior turned erratic, shouting threats and dragging one of the hostages into view, she noticed a pattern in the curtains behind him. A sliver of daylight cutting through gave her a 6-inch window barely visible from the adjacent building's rooftop. She requested reposition. "I have a shot," she told Rivera, the team lead. Skepticism buzzed across the channel until Ezra spoke up. "I've seen her shoot. If she says she has the angle, she does." Rivera gave a nod. Merritt moved fast, quiet, precise. On the rooftop, she laid down her rifle, breath slowed, hands steady. The coin rested next to the scope, like a parent watching from the sidelines. She took the shot. 1 crack, 1 hit, 1 suspect down, no hostage harmed. No applause. Just silence. The kind you get when professionals witness something too clean to argue with. Afterward, the team regrouped outside. Lawson, the loudest skeptic from 2 months ago, gave her a single nod. "Wouldn't have made that shot myself. Good call." That was it. No parade, no banner, just the kind of acceptance that weighs more than words. Ezra stood beside her as Rivera assigned roles for the next scenario. "Assistant Training Coordinator," Rivera said, glancing Ezra's way. "You earned it." Merritt looked at him. He didn't grin, just dipped his head once. Acceptance didn't come with applause, it came with trust. The unit didn't just tolerate her anymore, they calibrated to her. Because when you prove yourself under fire, literal and political, people stop seeing your gender, they see your aim. 6 months in, Merritt was no longer that woman who broke the record. She was now the lead marksmanship instructor for tactical candidates. Her class roster included 5 women, 2 Latino officers, and a former reservist with a hearing aid, not the usual lineup. And that was the point. She didn't need the department to move mountains. She just needed to hold the door open wide enough for someone else to walk through, without having to knock 3 times and beg. Her badge didn't just give her access. It gave others a door. She taught without fanfare, drilled them hard, expected excellence, because she knew the next Blackwood wasn't gone. He'd just change faces, switch uniforms, but if her class could shoot clean and stand taller, he wouldn't last long. Quietly, the culture began to shift. Recruits stopped chuckling when women stepped on the line. They started watching instead. One evening, at a department gala, she crossed paths with Blackwood again, stripped of his SWAT title, Reassigned to an administrative advisory role, he looked less like a legend and more like a relic. He approached her near the dessert table, his voice low and strangely hollow. "You could have ended me the day you revealed the tampering," he said. "Made it public. Humiliated me." Merritt didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She looked him square in the eyes and said, "Institutions change slower than bullets, but they hit harder in the long run." He didn't respond, just stood there searching for dignity among crumbs. She walked away without another word, the challenge coin in her pocket cool against her skin. A year after that fateful competition, Merritt opened her first advanced training cohort with a small speech. No fluff, no quotes, just facts. Then she placed her coin on the table next to the roster, not hidden, not secret, the engraved message now polished clear, earned in silence, fired with precision. She didn't just rewrite the rules, she reminded everyone that sometimes the best way to change a broken game isn't to flip the board, but to teach new players how to win smarter. You ever beat the system without a sound? Drop your stories in the comments, receipts welcomed. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.